Chronic loneliness is not just a bad mood. Research links it to higher risks of heart disease, stroke, dementia, depression, anxiety, and even earlier death. A major public health advisory reported about a 26% higher risk of premature death linked to loneliness and about a 29% higher risk linked to social isolation. The same advisory linked poor social connection to roughly a 29% higher risk of heart disease and a 32% higher risk of stroke. It even used the comparison that social disconnection can have a mortality impact comparable to smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day. That does not mean loneliness and tobacco harm the body in the same way. It means the health impact can be big enough to deserve serious attention. Before anything else, we need one important distinction. Loneliness and social isolation overlap, but they are not the same thing. Social isolation is objective. It means having few social contacts or interactions. Loneliness is subjective. It means feeling that your relationships are not enough in closeness, quality, or number. A person can be alone and not lonely. A person can also feel lonely in a crowd, a marriage, an office, or an online network. That distinction matters because both conditions predict health risk, but they do not always happen together. The strongest modern conclusion is that prolonged social disconnection affects the body at many levels at once. It reaches stress hormones, immune signaling, inflammation, blood vessels, sleep, behavior, cognition, and mortality risk. One of the biggest pathways starts with stress regulation. Chronic loneliness is linked to activation of the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis and the sympathetic nervous system. In simple language, the body begins to behave as if it is under a lasting social threat. Cortisol and other stress-related signals can become dysregulated. Instead of helping briefly in an emergency, the stress response starts becoming the background setting. That matters because the stress system is useful in short bursts. Over time, constant activation creates wear instead of protection. Loneliness is also tied to inflammation, and that is one reason the effects spread so widely through the body. Researchers describe a pattern, sometimes called the conserved transcriptional response to adversity. In that pattern, immune cells increase pro-inflammatory gene expression while reducing some antiviral and antibody-related responses. So the body can become more inflamed and, in some ways, less resilient against infection at the same time. Some studies have linked poor social connection to weaker vaccine responses and greater susceptibility to viral and respiratory illness. Inflammation does not stay in the immune system alone. It feeds into chronic disease across the body. Persistent inflammatory signaling can contribute to atherosclerosis, endothelial dysfunction, insulin resistance, and other damaging processes. Reviews on loneliness and cardiovascular health describe oxidative stress, pro-inflammatory monocytes, reduced healthy vascular signaling, and blood vessel damage. That helps explain why loneliness is not just a feeling in the mind. It can move into blood vessels, metabolism, and disease risk. Blood pressure is one of the clearest physical markers affected by chronic loneliness over time. Long-term work has linked loneliness to rising systolic blood pressure, especially as people grow older. Different studies give different numbers, but the overall pattern is consistent. Loneliness is linked to measurable cardiovascular strain. The hard effects go beyond blood pressure. Loneliness and social isolation are associated with coronary heart disease and worse outcomes after cardiac illness. Some reviews find especially large effects in people who already have heart disease, where isolation can raise later illness and mortality. Part of this is biological, but behavior matters too. The two sides reinforce each other. Lonely people may exercise less, sleep worse, smoke more, drink more, eat less well, and disengage from medical care. When those habits combine with inflammation and stress hormones, the body gets hit from more than one direction. Sleep is another major place where loneliness gets under the skin. People with chronic loneliness often report poorer sleep quality, more fragmented sleep, and a weaker sense of restoration. Even when total sleep time is not much shorter, sleep can feel lighter, less refreshing, and easier to disturb. That matters because sleep helps regulate inflammation, glucose metabolism, mood, pain sensitivity, and cardiovascular recovery. Once loneliness harms sleep, poor sleep can then magnify the same biological stress that loneliness started. Immune consequences deserve their own attention because higher inflammatory markers appear again and again in loneliness research. Not every marker shifts in every study, but the overall pattern of altered immune regulation is hard to ignore. Researchers often describe this accumulating wear as allostatic load, meaning the cost of repeated stress adaptation over time. That idea helps explain why loneliness is associated with a broad chronic disease profile instead of one narrow symptom. Brain and cognitive health are also involved. One widely cited estimate suggests loneliness in older adults is associated with about a 50% higher risk of dementia. That number should be handled carefully because the size of the effect differs across studies and causality is still debated. Even so, multiple cohort studies and meta-analyses support loneliness as a meaningful dementia risk factor. The likely pathway is mixed. Stress hormones, inflammation, sleep disruption, depression, reduced physical activity, vascular damage, and lower cognitive stimulation. Mental health sits in the center of this picture because loneliness and mood problems can drive each other in both directions. Loneliness is strongly associated with depression and anxiety, but depression and anxiety can also increase withdrawal, hopelessness, and negative social interpretation. That creates a loop where loneliness makes social contact feel harder, and harder social contact creates more loneliness. Social isolation is also a major predictor of suicidal thinking and behavior, which shows how serious the mental health side can become. This is why loneliness is not just being upset about being alone. It can alter threat perception itself. Social situations may begin to feel less safe, more effortful, and less rewarding, which can keep the cycle going. Metabolic health may suffer too. Some research links poor social connection to higher risk of type 2 diabetes and worse diabetic outcomes. Again, the pathway is probably mixed. Stress hormones, inflammation, poor sleep, diet, inactivity, and weaker healthcare engagement all contribute. Loneliness has also been associated with greater pain sensitivity and poorer recovery from illness. One reason may be that social safety is one of the signals the body uses to calm vigilance and lower stress. Mortality data makes the long-term effect hard to dismiss. A 2023 systematic review and meta-analysis of social isolation found about a 33% higher hazard of all-cause mortality among isolated adults. That evidence is observational, so it cannot prove loneliness or isolation alone directly causes every excess death. Poverty, disability, pre-existing illness, bereavement, caregiving strain, mental illness, personality, and neighborhood safety can overlap with disconnection. But even after adjustment for many of those factors, the relationship usually remains substantial. Another important point is that quality often matters more than raw quantity. Two people can have the same number of contacts and still face very different health risks, depending on whether those relationships feel secure and meaningful. A small trusted network may protect health better than frequent shallow contact. Conflict-heavy relationships can even add stress instead of reducing it. Age changes the pattern, but it does not trap the problem only in old age. Older adults often face bereavement, retirement, illness, mobility loss, and shrinking networks, so loneliness there is easy to see. But surveys in several countries also find high loneliness among adolescents and young adults, sometimes matching or exceeding elders. Digital communication can help maintain connection, but it is not an automatic cure. Passive, comparison-heavy online use may worsen loneliness for some people, while active, supportive, reciprocal contact may help. From an evolutionary view, the body may treat prolonged social disconnection as a biologically important threat. Humans are intensely social, and for most of history, losing reliable bonds increased risk of injury, starvation, and lack of care. That may be why the brain and immune system respond to chronic loneliness as a threat state rather than as a simple sad mood. At the same time, exaggerated claims should be avoided. Loneliness is not destiny. Not every lonely person becomes ill, and not every socially connected person is protected. The evidence is strongest at the population level. There is also a structural side to this problem. Housing, unsafe neighborhoods, long work hours, migration, disability, discrimination, poverty, and weak civic institutions all shape connection. Treating loneliness as a personal failure misses the larger context that can create or deepen social disconnection. The clearest summary is this: chronic loneliness nudges the body into a long-term threat posture. Stress signaling stays elevated or unstable, inflammation rises, sleep worsens, blood pressure and cardiovascular burden increase, and health behaviors often decline. Over years, that combination can raise disease risk, speed cognitive decline, and shorten life. So when researchers say loneliness affects the body, they mean it literally in hormones, blood vessels, immune cells, sleep architecture, and survival curves. If you want another hidden system story after this one, Read the script on the city that turned human waste into wealth.